Still like to have a few drinks options here. My name's Katie. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Grateful to be sober since July the 6th of 2011, as are a lot of other people. My parents, the police in San Diego, Denver, Memphis, a couple other departments. I have a home group. My home group is the Legacy Group in Plano, Texas. It meets every night of the week and noon meetings as well. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor women today. And I say that because there was a time in my sobriety where I had a home group, and I did a lot of this, speaking behind the podium, and I didn't really have a home group, and I didn't sponsor people, and I got drunk. And I'll get to that in a little while, but today it's really important that I identify that I'm still in the middle of this deal, in the middle of the boat. So, my story. You know, I walked in the room this morning and I ran into my friend Travis. We've been friends for quite a while, and he asked me how my little girl was. And I will tell you, there's people in Alcoholics Anonymous that have known me long enough to watch that little girl grow up, and she's not so little anymore. She's 17 years old, and she had prom last night. And it was her second prom because she goes to an all-girls school. And there was a time in Alcoholics Anonymous where she would come to the meetings and she would sit in the back corner and she would play, or she would write in her journals because she thought writing in her journal was what she was supposed to do, because that's what she heard all my sponsees do, right? And she would tell them, you know, I've been sober longer than you have. I'm sure after prom last night, that's not the story. So anyway, my life today is a lot different than it was back, you know, when I started in this deal, which was a long time ago. Clancy, who has since gone to the big meeting in the sky, used to talk about a been around date. So I've been around Alcoholics Anonymous since November 1st of 1998. That's when I came to my first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous for me. Again, my sobriety date is July the 6th of 2011. So it took me a little while. There was some pretty good stretches of sobriety in there, though. So my story, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. So, you know, I grew up not very far from here. I went to a parochial school for the first 8 years of my life, and then I went to that Catholic high school for a couple years, and I transferred over to the Park Cities to play basketball. I know that's really shocking to all of you. And I did very well. I was a bit of a chameleon growing up. I was the youngest of 5, the only girl, which also puts me in that role of princess. But being the only girl also puts me in the role of being the one out on the baseball field, the soccer field, the football field. And I had an alcoholic mother. And I don't share that because that's what makes me an alcoholic, right? I share that because really what that allowed me to do was to hang out with my brothers on the football field, the soccer field, the baseball field for a number of years. And my mom ended up getting sober when I was 11 years old. She's still sober today. God bless Alcoholics Anonymous. But also what that gave me was the opportunity to learn about Alcoholics Anonymous in our sister program of Alateen. So I joined Alateen when I was really, really young. And I learned about the 12 steps in Alateen, right? And I learned just enough to know that I didn't really want to be a part of this program long term. And, you know, I didn't really know that much about alcoholism. I knew that my mom drank. I knew that she got in trouble sometimes. She fell asleep at the neighbor's house or in the pool. My dad would put her to bed, and that's kind of what it looked like to me when I was young. My brothers, I'm the youngest of 5. There's a 12-year gap between me and the oldest. So my brothers would have these awesome parties at the rental house. And when I was really little, I would do like Sprite out of the beer bongs, right? That's kind of what my childhood, I mean, we were a fun house. We were the house where we had all the football parties growing up. People loved to be over at our house. And so, you know, I didn't need or want for really much growing up. And, you know, I grew up in that environment where we had the pictures hanging on the wall, all dressed in white down at Turtle Creek, and things were really pretty on the outside. And they were pretty good behind closed doors. But I never really felt like I fit in because I was that younger little sister that just kind of tagged along. I wasn't the student. And this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but this is also my story. So my story is that I really struggled in school. I was not by any means an A student, maybe a C student at best, but I had this thing called dyslexia, and back in the 80s that wasn't super well known or understood. So I did things that learned to like lie, manipulate, cheat through school, and wasn't proud of it, but that's how I got through school. And then when my mom got sober, she wanted me to be a little girl and put me in ballerina and dance and modeling, and I didn't really care for those things either. So my first addiction was an eating disorder. That didn't go over real well, so they said, okay, well, we won't make you do those things if you'll knock that off. Sent me to treatment, all that, before I ever had my first drink. See, I was convinced I wasn't going to drink, because again, I was educated about the disease of alcoholism. So if I don't drink, if I don't have my first drink, then I won't be an alcoholic, right? And that's what they all told me, right? So I had other issues, right? But I had learned lie, manipulate, cheat, do whatever I needed to do to get what I needed. Because, see, I wanted what I wanted 5 minutes before I knew I wanted it, every time. I'm still kind of like that sometimes today. So I go through school. My parents don't make me do those modeling girly things, and I decide that I'm going to be this athlete. And I became very successful at that. And like I said, I wasn't going to drink. So when I was 18, I was playing basketball in Europe after high school, and it's legal to drink over there when you're 18. So, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. So in Europe, on this bus, they don't give you ice in Europe. So it's orange Fanta and vodka. It's fairly gross. I know that today. I didn't know that then because I had no idea what my measurement was. But I drank the orange Fanta and vodka. I got really sick on that bus. We stopped at a rest stop. I proceeded to get sick. I got back on that bus and I kept drinking. And they said, hey, I was the youngest one on the team, right? You should probably slow down. And I said, what are you talking about? I just threw up. I can keep going. I mean, it made sense to me. It's not in my system anymore. I really like that feeling, or I didn't really know it was a feeling at the time. I didn't have a whole lot of words again. And so I can drink, I got this, and I kept drinking. That was the first time I drank, and I'll tell you, it didn't drink like that every time I drank, but most times I drank like that, right? The only times I didn't really drink like that was when somebody was acutely watching me, which they learned to acutely watch me very quickly. I had a lot of great enablers in my life. So I came back from that trip early. I was with the international team, and I came back early, and they said, why did you come back early? Well, we have the Olympics coming up. It's an alternate in that. And we're going to Atlanta. And then I was going off to California for college. And I get out to California, and I'm playing in college, and I have a devastating knee injury that takes me out of the sport. And what's the first thing I do? I start drinking. And you know, the next couple years is I could go on and on with the stories and the lies and the things that happened. But the truth of the matter is I went down very quickly to the disease of alcohol. I didn't cross a line. There was no hard drinker. There was no, maybe this, maybe that. I drank like off the wall from the beginning to get drunk every time I drank, right? I carried one of those green Gatorade bottles around campus, and that's how I drank from the beginning. And within 2 years, I'd had so many knee surgeries. Alcohol comes in many forms, including some liquid forms, and I did some outside issues along with those knee surgeries, and I was full-blown crazy by the time I was a sophomore, junior in college. I had learned to lie to my parents and tell them, well, I'm not going to make it home this summer because I got to do physical therapy. I'm not going to make it home over Christmas because I got to teach a Christmas camp to the kids, or I've got to volunteer, right? Because see, when I was home, when I left for college, I was that pride and joy. I was the kid that didn't drink. I was the youngest of the family in those pictures that are on the wall dressed in white of the kid that, everyone idolized. I was in the newspaper regularly for my athleticism. I was not the one that was basically failing out of school, but I had tutors that took care of me because I was a student athlete. I was not the kid that was getting in trouble at every turn. I wasn't the kid that was ending up in the campus police or resident assistance office for having the party, getting locked in the closet with the keg, which happened more than once, right? You'd think I would learn. Or the kid that was having to switch dorms. By the time I was a junior in college, I'd lived in 6 different dorms and I was living in graduate housing because they said, we don't know where to put you, Katie. You're on a full scholarship, we have to provide you housing, but you've created such havoc in our dorm community, our residential housing, that we're gonna have you live in graduate housing. Please don't terrorize the families. Right? I mean, that's pretty much what it looked like. And so, by the time I was a junior, I had had so many knee surgeries for a number of reasons. The truth of the matter is I didn't follow directions. I didn't do my physical therapy because I was drinking. I didn't do my physical therapy because I liked that other stuff they gave me when I had those knee surgeries. So maybe I had a few extra surgeries. I didn't do that physical therapy because, let's face it, I was just too drunk to do it. And so by my junior year, they said, we're going to have you coach. You're going to be the youngest college coach in Division I basketball. And so there was this big celebration over Thanksgiving that year. My parents came out, actually back up, over Halloween that year. This was kind of a turning point for me. I'd been in lots of trouble on campus, as I told you. I had crashed cars. I had lost cars. At one point, I lost a car at the bar. And I came out and I thought maybe it had gotten towed. Then no one could find it. We reported it stolen. I got a new car. Found out months later that the police had towed it, but it was impounded wrong. So, those are the kinds of things. Really no real consequences, but trouble, right? Causing havoc in everyone's life that I touched. So on Halloween of that year, I was in San Diego. I needed a convertible. So I was driving a convertible. I had a whole bunch of people in my car, and we're going to a taco shop. And I came to in a blackout. I didn't know it was a blackout at the time, but I've since learned what a blackout was. And I was in a blackout, and I had those frequently. And I came to in this blackout. And I said, where are we going? And they said, a taco shop. And the next thing I remember was waking up in my apartment. Now, I'll tell you, I'm 6'3" today. I was 6'3" then. I weighed about 125 pounds, and I was I Dream a Genie that year for Halloween, and I thought I looked really good. And I woke up in my graduate housing without a costume, totally naked in my bed, no car, and no clue how I'd gotten there, because the last memory I had was I was heading to that taco shop with 10 or 12 people in my car, right? Now, if you grew up in the church that I grew up in, on November 1st after Halloween, it's All Saints Day. And on All Saints Day, you go to church. And I thought the more I went to church and the more that I participated, the better I would be and the more I'd be forgiven, right? So that's what I did. So I went to church, and the priest is up there talking about how we put these costumes on and our true selves come out. And I don't remember a whole lot. I still haven't found my car from the night before or my costume. I don't know how I got home, and quite frankly, I'm really scared, right? And that just fear starts to settle in, and that demoralization, and my friends have called, and that phone, we think the phone weighs 1,000 pounds and we have to pick up and call a sponsor or somebody new or somebody for help in Alcoholics Anonymous. Yet the phone, after getting drunk, of having to pick up and figure out what happened the night before, I haven't had to do that for a really long time. But that night I had to do that, right? I had to figure out, where was my car? Where were my clothes? How did I get home? Did I go home by myself? Like, what did that look like? And I came to find out later that I had gone to a friend's house with them. They realized how intoxicated I was. They took my keys, and at some point in the middle of the night, I got up and I walked home. What we figured out. They tried to stop me. They weren't able to stop me, but they watched me walk home, so I was fine. I was safe. I got my car back. That's what that looked like. But after that church service, I called this lady. It was also Alcohol and Drug Awareness Week. I'd been put on probation at school, and in colleges they have these weeks. So they said, Katie, we think that you should try and stay sober this week. It's part of this pledge that you've signed. All the athletes on campus are doing it for 1 week. You need to be sober. And I thought, there is no way. I had tried to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no way. And so I signed this pledge because I was a liar, right? And I signed this pledge and nothing happened. I continued to drink. I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and that was November 1st of 98. My parents came out for that basketball tournament where I became the youngest coach in D1, and they left, and 2 days after they left, I overdosed. I left a note saying I was done. I couldn't imagine my life with or without alcohol. I remembered these 12 steps, right? Remember, I had those in my mind from when I was 12, 13 years old. And I specifically remembered the 9th step where I would have to make amends for all those things I had done. And there were a lot of things that I had done, ranging from the time I was like 13 and before I ever picked up my first drink, right? Because I had the disease long before I picked up the first drink and the mindset. So I thought ending my life would be the way to go. And I was an adult at this point, so they couldn't call my parents. Made sure everyone knew that. And I woke up I went to a psychiatric hospital and voluntarily checked myself in because they told me that was my only option once they found me in my apartment. And I will tell you, I'm not proud of this today, but I attempted suicide in that hospital. And when I came to, I had hung myself and had been out for a number of days, and my father was at my bedside, and I immediately began to make amends for everything that I had ever done at days sober. I do not recommend that to anybody. Did not go over well. I would then spend the next 2.5 years around the country in treatment centers. 2.5 years, going from Minnesota to California to Colorado to Tennessee, all over the country, right? And keep in mind, my mom's sober at this point. So wherever I go, there's Alcoholics Anonymous showing up. And I don't really think I wanted to be sober, but I will tell you what treatment did for me is it kept me alive long enough to hear a message in Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the end, I landed in Denver, Colorado in 2000. I just realized this clock isn't changing. I don't know if anyone's paid attention to that. This clock doesn't move. It's all right, I'm good. It's kind of tricky there. It's good. So anyway, I spent all this time in these treatment centers, and in 2000 I landed in Denver, Colorado because Mom and Dad were there. And I'm their baby. I'm their only girl. And when I woke up in that hospital and my dad was at my bedside, my dad was just disappointed one more time. And my mom thought I had repressed memory from the suicide attempt. But I went to all these treatment centers. I landed in Denver, Colorado. I'm living in a sober living house. And one more time I get drunk because that's what I do, right? Because I'm an alcoholic and without a solution, I'm going to drink. And so I drink again. And 6 months later I drink again and I'm living in this sober living again. And they kick me out this time, not because I drank, but because at this point I'm just not willing to follow the rules, right? I'm entitled. I think that I'm different from everyone else because don't you know who my family is? Don't you know my mom's been sober? Don't you know I need to go help them with whatever health issue they have, or I need to go help them because my dad's business, or whatever it is, right? I wasn't drinking at this point, but they kicked me out of the sober living house because I wasn't willing to follow the rules. So, at this point, Mom and Dad moved me back in their house because I'm sober, and I use them as the excuse, and I get drunk again. And Mom and Dad said, well, good luck. We've watched you now for 2.5, 3 years try and kill yourself. We're going to give you your car. They had traded in that convertible and bought me a Jeep because I'm now in Colorado and I need a Jeep. I was just a mess. And said, good luck. We hope you don't kill yourself, but please get as far away from us as possible because we're done watching it. I will tell you, I went real far. I went 2 miles to the local park and slept in the back of my Jeep that night. That was December of 2001, which became my sobriety date. I went to the home group that I had been going to for a while at that point. I also should say at this point I'd been sober about a year just prior to that. And I had been serving in Alcoholics Anonymous in the young people side. So I was really, really active. I was really young, right? And I was really active in Young People's AA. And Young People's AA served a purpose for me. I don't know if the front of this podium has a circle and triangle on it, but There's 3 legacies in Alcoholics Anonymous: unity, service, and recovery, right? And unity is a fellowship. And what Young People's offered me was that fellowship, right? And a level of service, right? I had been doing quite a bit on Young People's conferences and that sort of thing. I just kept missing that part of recovery, right? I wasn't working the 12 steps, not for lack of trying or not for lack of availability or women showing up in my life, just because I wasn't willing, right? I had just been hanging out. And so I go to this conference that I had been planning, and this lady comes up to me and she's talking to me, and another young lady walks up and she says, "Don't waste your time with Katie. She's been through all the women here." And this was a lady who had multiple, like 20, 30 years at the time. And she said, "Why don't you take a hike? I'm going to talk to Katie." And she talked to me and she said, "Do you want to be sober?" And I think that was the first time that I was really honest, and I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, do you want to live your life differently?" Yeah, I can't live this way. It's not working. I'm living in my car. So yeah, I'll do whatever you want me to do. She said, "Well, you don't have a whole lot left to lose. So why don't you read the first 43 pages of the big book? You do have a big book, right?" I said, "Yeah, I have a few. They've given them to me at all the treatment centers," and I had read some of them. And she said, "The first 43 pages of the big book are the first step." That was news to me. Now, I'd been in Alcoholics Anonymous for a number of years at this point. I had no idea what that looked like, right? I had been reading the steps off the wall, right? I had missed the precursor to the first step, which was we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were real alcoholic, right? So she said, "Why don't you read the first 43 pages of the big book and be at my house on Monday night at 6 o'clock? And on Sunday, she called me and said, "Actually, my Sunday night canceled. Make sure you've read that and be here at 5. Okay, this was a little different than the young people, the young women that I had been asking the college kids to sponsor me, right? I had been just kind of trampling over all of them. So Michelle would become my sponsor, and Michelle was exactly what I needed, right? But I'd been too scared to cross over to that real world Alcoholics Anonymous and to try and balance on all legs of the stool. And so Michelle would do things like be at my house at 4:30. We'd meet at her house at 4:30 on Thursdays for Parker Thursday night. When I started to introduce myself at the beginning, I said Parker, Colorado, which is really funny because I haven't shared that in a meeting in a long time. But that was our home group. Our home group was Thursday night, Parker Thursday night in Parker, Colorado. Meet at her house at 4:30. We'd do step work in the basement with her, and then we'd meet with her husband and the guys that he sponsored, because she said things like, if you're going to be a member of this program, you're going to go through the steps and the traditions and the concepts, because you're going to learn what it is you're going to be a member of. Okay. There was no arguing. Or, hey, we're going to go out of town this weekend. Be ready at 4 o'clock. We'll pick you up. We'll pack a bag for 3 days. There was no question. There was no I have to work. There was none of that. It was this is what you're going to do. And so that's what it looked like, right? And that was the beginning of my sobriety in 2001. So at 4:30, we would meet at her house. We would do that. We would go to the basement. We would do the steps or the traditions or whatever that looked like. Then we'd go over to the group. We'd open the group by 6:30 for a 7:30 meeting, and then we'd usually go to Perkins afterward around 9 after we finished cleaning up the meeting. We might be lucky if we were home by 11 or 11:30. And then I'd drive the hour back to Denver or back to where I was staying. And that's what my first 2 years looked like, right? I got back in school. I got right with my family, made amends to them. I went back to school. I did fairly well. I started to show up for my life. Life got good. I'm working now at Denver Central Office. I'm in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in the middle of the boat. I got all sides of the triangle. Life is gelling. We have a graduation party. I moved back to Texas, right? It's 2003, 4 at this point. And I moved back to Texas and I'm selling real estate. I grew up in Dallas. My mom was really successful in that market, so that's what I'm going to do. I met him in Alcoholics Anonymous. We all know what that looks like, right? So I met him in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got pregnant with this beautiful little girl. I got engaged. His dad died. He relapsed. Exactly like that. That's exactly what it looked like. So here I am, pregnant in Alcoholics Anonymous, about to be a single parent. He's out smoking dope, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. That wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan. I'm like 3-4 years sober at this point, and that wasn't the plan. So what do? I pick up the phone and I call mom and dad one more time. They're living in Tennessee. Okay, I'm not drinking. I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I don't know what to do. And it took me a while to pick up the phone and call them. I'm laying in a hospital at Presbyterian Hospital because I'm so sick with stress at this point. They think I'm losing the baby. Finally, mom and dad come up with this agreement that I'm going to have to sign with them to stay with them till she's at least 2, because they don't think I can make responsible choices, because clearly I can't, right? My choices are not working. So I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where the people in Alcoholics Anonymous again surround me, right? They surround me, and the women throw me a baby shower, and I'm in the middle of the boat again. And I'm chairing meetings, going to meetings, have a home group, have a sponsor, have this beautiful baby. I had a horrible pregnancy, but I had a wonderful delivery and have had a healthy baby ever since. And the doctors, the day she was born, called in my family and said, we don't know if she's going to make it. You're going to have to do a C-section, and if we do, she may not make it because she's been on blood thinners her whole pregnancy. I'll tell you, that was the easiest delivery the doctor ever had. And it's been really good for her. She's been healthy ever since. So, long story short, I moved back to Texas when she was 6 years old. I was 9 years sober at the time, right? I picked up my 9-year chip at Preston Group, and I started doing a lot of this. I started doing a lot of speaking behind the podium. I had been to the International just months before. Travis and I met at what was called the Romance and Finance Group, the Pink and Green Group. And it met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we did the steps one Tuesday and the traditions on Thursdays, and that's what it looked like, right? But again, I was doing this. I was speaking at the podium, and I was hanging out in Alcoholics Anonymous just like I was doing 10 years earlier. And I had this little girl in kindergarten in the Park Cities, and I was trying to keep up with the Joneses, but I wasn't sponsoring people, and I wasn't doing 10, 11, and 12. And it took me almost 6 months to the day to get drunk. And I say to get drunk because that's exactly what happened. I picked up the phone and I called my friend Frank, and I said, Frank, I really don't want to go see fireworks with you tonight. Some of y'all might know Frank W. And I said, I really don't want to see fireworks with you tonight. I want to go have a drink with those moms at Lily's school. And I just want to have a glass of wine. I've never had a glass of wine in my life. Because I don't know why that sounded good to me or decent. One glass of wine. So that's how the conversation went. We were meeting at his parents' house to go see this fireworks with a bunch of people from the group. And he said, why don't you come over here? So we met at his parents' house, and we sat there and we talked, and he tried to get me, exactly like the book says, to pray. He tried to get me to a first step, to understand. He tried to read to me. I said, Frank, this isn't what I want. I want to go have a drink. He said, if you really want to drink, the book says try some controlled drinking. Try it more than once. If you're not convinced you're an alcoholic. Because at that point, I was convincing him that I wasn't an alcoholic. Forgetting everything that I've just told you. Now, a couple key things that happened. That little girl was in kindergarten, and she was summertime, and she was at a dude ranch with her grandparents. It was the first time she'd been out of town or away from me in her life. So I was on my own. I was teaching summer school to underprivileged kids, feeling really guilty that my parents were paying my bills and I'm living in this gorgeous home, right, that I shouldn't be living in, and taking care of these kids that, can barely feed themselves. And I'm just kind of a fraud, right? I'm living this false life. So Frank says to me, he says, there's alcohol in that cabinet right there. I won't pour it for you, but what did you used to drink? And I said, Jack and Coke. And he stood up and he put the bottle of Jack Daniels in front of me, and I stood up and I poured myself a glass of Jack Daniels. And I'll tell you, at 9.5 years, it was just like it was in the beginning. And I started drinking that Jack Daniels. And I had a couple drinks, and then all of a sudden it started to burn. And I said, do you have any Coke? And I mixed it with Coke. And I drank a couple more, and I don't know what happened, but we got back to my house, and the people we were meeting for fireworks all had, 20-something years of sobriety each. I stepped on my front porch to smoke a cigarette. Apparently I was taking pills that I had laying around the house from more knee surgeries because, my knee is never fully repaired, right? So I started taking more meds, drank some more, and back on the front porch. They'd called the police a couple of times on me because I was clearly acting erratic, trying to hurt myself. And the second time I stepped on that front porch, the police put me in handcuffs and took me to Green Oaks. It was 5.5 hours after I started drinking after 9.5 years of sobriety. I'm in handcuffs on the way to the psychiatric hospital. There was a time when I would tell my story and I would boast at kind of the craziness of that whole situation and how I got out in a certain amount of time and, I was so manipulative and this and that. But really the sadness is I wasn't done. Right? They locked me in that psych hospital and I got out fairly quickly because I lied again and I manipulated and I did things like, will you put me back in the padded room because I don't belong with these people, right? And so I got out of that hospital. I went to a meeting with someone, and then I went to Romance and Finance that Tuesday night and my friend David H. was speaking. And they said, are you done? And I said, I don't know. And there was a lot of profanity in that statement. Y'all locked me up. And they said, then go try some controlled drinking. Try it more than once, but stay away from the drugs. Don't kill yourself. And let us know if you want our help. Okay. So I did that for the meeting while they were there, right? I mean, they had said that to me a couple of times over those 4 days. And so while they were at the meeting, I thought, well, I'm going to try that bottle of wine. I was dead set on that bottle of wine, guys. I stopped at Tom Thumb in Highland Park Village and I bought 3 bottles of wine because I needed a glass and that seemed reasonable. I bought 3 bottles of wine, 2 red or 2 white and one of the other. And I went home and I drank all 3 bottles of wine while they were in one AA meeting. And I started calling them and they weren't answering the phone and I couldn't figure out why they weren't answering the phone. They were still in the meeting. So they called me afterward and they were like, well, I think you need to figure out what you're doing. And I was still dressed in my clothes. I'd been teaching summer school. I was still dressed in my summer school clothes. And now I'm in South Dallas trying to find something else that's going to get me to where I need to get because alcohol had stopped working. Alcohol had stopped working and I was just as cognizant as I am now. And finally one of them answered the phone. She said, I suggest that you go home and you pray. And I got home and I dumped all my books on my bed that I had kept in a duffel bag. See, I'd moved 6 months earlier, and back in the day in Alcoholics Anonymous, you used to get a book every time you celebrated something. Lots of books, right? Now I had dyslexia. I hadn't read any of those books, but I would say thank you. I'd write little note cards because that's what I did, right? I was taught to do that. But I had every book written in Alcoholics Anonymous in this duffel bag in the bottom of my closet from that move. And I dumped them on my bed, and there was a red book with gold writing, and they've changed the cover since then, but it was called Came to Believe, right? And it caught my eye, and I read some of the lines in that book, and I got on my knees, and I started saying some of those prayers, and they were real intense prayers. They were like, God, if you're there, please help me, right? And things that, I just hadn't occurred to me. So I started saying some of those prayers, and all of a sudden, my legs started to tingle, and I thought, thank God the liquor's working. Yeah, no. It was, here I am, like doubting this, right? And I climb up in my bed, and I can still feel it, right? And I know that God's with me. And that was the beginning, and that was July the 6th of 2011, or July the 5th. And so, that was the beginning. Right? And Kim became my sponsor. Now, I will say, the night before I relapsed or got drunk, I had gone to a treatment center, like 4th of July celebration. It was like July 2nd. It was that weekend. And I had gone to this treatment center celebration, and a friend of mine was speaking, and there was all kinds of events. And I'd run into my ex, and he was remarried in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wasn't prepared for that, and they had a new baby, and I had all those resentments. And there's no surprise that happened, right? No surprise that all those resentments were still there, because I hadn't really worked through those, right? And that was the night before I got drunk. So what happened in coming back in the program this time is I got to start over, right? So I got to find a new relationship with God, a different relationship with God, because clearly the God that I had wasn't working, or I wasn't seeking it. And so I learned very quickly that if God can go out of town, your God can go out of town, which was my 7-year-old at the time, I probably needed a new God, right? And so my 7-year-old was fired as my God, and I got a new relationship with God. And so, I got to start over, and I started with this idea that I wanted a God of love. Now I had no idea what love was. Zero. Still working on that one. But that was the beginning, right? And my sponsor would say things like, well, how free do you want to be? And, well, I want to be free because clearly not this halfway thing doesn't work anymore. And at the time I was living in a house that, again, my parents still owned. And we started at the very beginning, right? And she would take me shopping for groceries because at that point I had relapsed into that eating disorder. So I was sober but active in another addiction. And we started over, right? And so I built this relationship with God, and I got into the 4-step, and I got to see my part of that relationship. Even though my ex had relapsed, I still had a huge part in what that looked like. And I had this little girl that longed for a relationship with her father that I was blocking and staying a part of and away from. And, I'll tell you today that little girl this morning called, and she was like, well, what's the plan tonight? I'm at Dad's right now. We just went to church. He wants to know if we're going to do dinner together or what's going on. Are we going to dinner with Kim, which is my sponsor, or can we do this, right? Because that's her life today. Her life is that she's got mom, she's got dad, we're all intertwined, right? And that's because of this program. That's because in the 4-step, I got to get real, I got to get honest, and I got to see what my part was, right? Not only with him, but with my parents and my family. Those were the big, deep ones, right? And I got to get right, and I got to learn how to really apply this program in my life. Right? And I got to learn how to live all 3 of those legacies and not just be in the fellowship or not just be, working the steps or not just be in service. Because I can hide in service too. I'll tell you that first year that I came back, all I did was Gathering of Eagles, which was great. And Gathering of Eagles is a great conference and it serves a purpose, but I can hide there too, or I can hide in general service. And keep myself busy. And I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to avoid my family or avoid my measures and what it is that I'm supposed to do. So I went through the steps, and I learned, more about my character defects and some outside books, Drop the Rock, learned some of those things. And it's changed over the last 10 years. Right, and when I was making amends and started that process, I joined Al-Anon because that was key for me to get into that program because I had a lot of alcoholics in my life, right? And I was meddling in areas that I didn't need to meddle in. And so, when I was going to make amends to my parents, I was still trying to make deals with God. I don't know if anyone else here makes deals with God, but I was trying to make a deal with God, and I said, God, if you'll give me an airline ticket to Florida, my parents at this point were living in Florida, now I had to buy 2 tickets because that little girl had grown up. Then I need a ticket for less than $300 each, which was really pricey at the time. I'll go make these amends to my parents because my sponsor told me I couldn't write them a letter, which I really wanted to do. And so I went to Florida because, of course, I get on Hotwire or Priceline or something and found a ticket. Because tickets were like $500 each, but you can name your own price. And I got those tickets each for under $300. So off we went to Florida, and I make amends to my parents, and I made amends to my dad, and that went fine, and I made amends to my mom. And minutes after I make amends to my mom, it's time for my daughter to have lunch. And I don't know about any of you who have children, but my daughter never ate her vegetables or never ate right in my mom's eyes. So it was always something, right? And it was mostly on me that I didn't feel I measured up to mom, right? Mom didn't really care. And so we start arguing one more time 5 minutes after I've made amends. And I looked at my mom and I said, why don't you prepare lunch today? I'm going to go in my room. And I went in my room and I got on my knees. And my mom came in and she said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, but I don't want to fight with you anymore. I want this to be a clean slate. I want to start over. And it's not about the meal. It's not about any of that. And that was the beginning of an amend, right? Because in the past I'd made amends, but it was an I'm sorry, let's do something different, but I hadn't really changed my behavior. And this was the first time that I realized my behaviors were gonna change, right? And so that was the start. And, it didn't mean that I had to take things that were inappropriate or not acceptable, but it meant that I had to take a step back and not fight for the things that weren't okay, right? So, the ninth step was life-changing. And we started doing little things with her dad, like inviting them over or sending a Father's Day gift. That was the beginning, right? And then inviting him over for a Father's Day barbecue to the house because my daughter wanted to get to know her father. And he, would show up to volleyball games with his other kids. And my mom would walk out the back door of setting off the alarm of the gym. No joke. So now we got the alarm going off. My daughter's playing a volleyball game. Dad's here. I'm coaching. And, it's a mess. But it's our family, and we're going to work through it. And Alcoholics Anonymous was there through it all, right? When I was 4 years sober, I moved up to North Dallas because my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia as well, and she needed some extra help. And so I bought a house in North Dallas, and I became fully self-supporting. Huge for me, right? Because I began to apply the traditions in my life. And I began to live the traditions, right? The traditions are to the group what the steps are to the individual. But if we can live the traditions in our life, then we can start to apply those in the way we live. And so if I can become self-supporting, then I got totally free. And so that was the beginning of that. When I was 5 years sober, we had a horrific car accident. Some people here maybe remember that. And that horrific car accident nearly cost me my life. We were in downtown Dallas. It was spring break, and I was T-boned, and I had a back, neck, and brain injury, and I spent 6 months in the hospital learning to put a blue block on top of a yellow block and learning to talk. And Lily was in the car, and she broke her arm, but she had some severe PTSD from that. And when I came home from the hospital, she was in her room crying, and I went in her room, and I said, "Baby, what's wrong?" And she said, what is going on? And we had my sponsor there arranging a schedule and my grand sponsor making chicken soup. And the guys were hanging handicap bars in the bathroom. And there was a nurse there arranging the meds and somebody else creating a transportation schedule. And she said, "Are these people ever going to leave?" Right? Referring to Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, "Yeah, baby, eventually they will, but we need their help right now." And those are the same people that she asks if she can come over after the meeting and go to fellowship and go to dinner with today, right? And that's a little girl who's going to be a senior in high school next year. I don't know about you, but if you have any experience with high school kids, they don't typically want to hang out with their parents and their friends. But she wants to know if her boyfriend can come over and meet my sponsor for dinner because she wants the sign off from them, right? And that's a miracle in Alcoholics Anonymous, not to mention the miracle that I'm actually here walking, talking, and functioning, right? Or that I have a full-time job that actually supports my family today, because that wasn't part of the deal. We were going to be good if I could even walk again, right? And God just continues to bless us and show up, right? And that little girl, got the help she needed in school, and now she's in a great other school that is going to launch her for college. I took her last week to look at College Station for college, right? And she gets down there and we're heading home and she looks at me and she says, "It's all going to be okay." I said, "Yeah, honey, it's already okay." She said, "No, but I know it's going to be okay." And when your kids look at you and say, "I know it's going to be okay," that's when you know, right? And that's not because I did really this extravagant thing. That's because Alcoholics Anonymous gave our family a life beyond anything we could have imagined, right? Because I continue to show up. And I had a sponsor who didn't have kids, and when we were going to some meetings early on when she was young, when she was like 6, 7, 8, she would come to those meetings and she would sit and cry, or she'd be mad. She'd be like, "I don't want to go to another meeting, Mom," right? She'd hear my sponsor say that, so she'd repeat everything she heard. And that was one of the things, "I don't want to go to another meeting, Mom." And I would say, okay, so my sponsor had me create a calendar for her, right? And it was color-coded on the fridge before she could read, and it would say, AA meeting out, AA meeting in the house. I used to host a big book study in the house. Family night. Wednesday nights were her favorite night of the week because we put all the electronics away. We did just her and I time, 4 hours on Wednesday nights where it was just her and I, and then, time with dad, different things. But we had a schedule. And to this day, I re-implemented family night when she started driving because the kid was never home. And now she's like, hey, it's family night. It's time to do something together. What are we going to do this week? And she plans them and looks forward to them, right? And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous for me is about. I don't have to drink today, and I walked through quite a bit with that surgery. My knee still isn't 100%, but I had a total knee replacement a year ago. Again, the people in Alcoholics Anonymous came together. Those parents that gave me my car keys and said, good luck, we hope you don't kill yourself, they're very much a part of my life. They just moved to Sun City, and they call me every day. They want to come back to Dallas, I'm pretty sure. But they really come back and they stay with me now. And my home is their home. And they want to know if they can come in for the weekend and, what's the plan and when are you going to come visit? And, those are all miracles in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And the women that I get to sponsor and that I get to see grow up, right? Those are the women that are a part of my family, right? And so, today Alcoholics Anonymous has not only given me my life back, but it's given my family an opportunity to have a mom, a daughter, a sister. I still have those 4 brothers. They're all in Austin. I see them for certain events and holidays and that sort of thing, but I get to show up. I show up for them and I show up for their kids. And I go where I say I'm going to go. And I answer the phone when they call. And those aren't things that I could do. And they invite me back today. And so, I'm really grateful that, I'm grateful that Patrick asked me to speak today, but I'm really grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous continues to keep the doors open, and that I get to be a part of, and that I don't have to sit on the outside anymore and not feel a part of. So thank you all so much.